just a word of warning, I had two wisdom teeth taken out up here, so I'm still kind of swollen and feeling a little bit weird. Because they got me on they got me on antibiotics and stuff like that.
So thank you so much for coming on. I wanted to have you on because I find your story absolutely interesting. You are living in Thailand, but one of the things that you are most well known for is your Michelin-Star restaurant, Pok Pok. I think that, and I've told you how I discovered you, and it's kind of funny. And then I went down this whole rabbit hole, and I just found, wow, this is so fascinating. How you said you came to Thailand on just backpacking and stuff, like in the 90s, and it kind of started from there. And that to me was fascinating, like how that came about. I've been kind of living vicariously through your post because I am like a closet wannabe foodie, but I'm actually like the exact opposite in real life because I've got crazy, weird, and I thought I had the weirdest food issues in the world until he's shaking his head because he knows I'm going to say it, until I met Desmond, and he's got weirder food issues. And I made a comment to him last night. I said, I can't believe it's us that's going to be talking to Andy, because it should be somebody that's got like this great palate that could talk about this kind of stuff. And he's got the two people that just crap food.
Well, that can be boring. That can be boring, though. Honestly, this is because people who roll in my world, who do these kind of things, tend to ask the same questions as each other because they have this sort of mindset, this set of like parameters in the story in their head. People who aren't involved in it ask not the same questions, and to me, that's much more interesting. Of course, I love talking about restaurants, I love talking about food, and I love talking about it from many different angles. But when you're talking with somebody who's primarily into that, that's what you end up talking about. So
yeah, right.
I think having the opportunity to talk to somebody that's not their primary thing is good. It's good.
One of the other reasons why I really wanted to have you on here is because I found that you have similar tastes in music and stuff like that. And I always resonate with people that are like, that love music. I think that that's one of the things that kind of resonates with me the most about a person. Like if they start talking music, I'm totally down to talk music, or kind of cite certain things that they like. That is exciting to me. And that's kind of interesting because I think that on the outward appearance, most people wouldn't look at you like, oh, that's a chef. I mean, I thought you were a wrestler, but that's another story.
Yeah.
And but you could tell though, oh, this is a person for whatever reason that's into music. That's into music. So I kind of wonder. You grew up on the West Coast?
No, I grew up on the East Coast, to be honest with you. I was born in North Carolina. My family moved us to California. I left there when I was about 6 or 7 years old, and we moved to the East Coast. And I stayed on the East Coast until I graduated from high school. So I guess you have to say that the traditional thought of where you grow up would have to be Philadelphia and Vermont primarily.
Way up there.
Yeah.
What was like on the radio waves over there?
Well, I grew up in a family that played music, so we played old-timey music, and we had a record player, and so I listened to my parents' records, which were, Grateful Dead, Rolling Stones, Beatles, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Bob Dylan, all that stuff, all those old chestnuts from the 60s. That was what I grew up on. And then at some point, we went on a holiday, and we went to some friend's house who had some records that weren't in my parents' collection, which was Jimi Hendrix, which kind of blew my mind. And then later on, your choice of radio stations in where I lived in northern Vermont was pretty small. We basically had the classic rock station. I can't remember which one it was, but it was, one of the ones that just blasts a huge signal might have been from Boston. It might have been from Burlington. I can't remember. So that was always around. But there was a college radio station out of Burlington, that's, you know, that was one of the ones that you could get. And any kind of new music that came across my plate either came from listening to this college radio station or from friends. Now, and my group of friends happened to be people like me who hadn't been born in Vermont, who had moved from somewhere else. So, I had a couple of very influential friends. I had a friend who was massively into Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin, and he bought the first Van Halen record. and, and so, like, I got fed that, and that was really great. But then I also had a very close friend who was into Little Feat, Frank Zappa, Jeff Beck and Weather Report, and various other sort of like stuff that was further afield that I wouldn't have gotten a hold of unless. So, and at that time, you got to remember, I'm 60, so there wasn't an internet. There wasn't a way of finding out about music unless you bought a magazine or read a book, and or you could go to the city. I lived in rural Vermont, so going to buy a record was not an easy thing. You had to go into the city, which was an hour away, and I wasn't able to drive at the time because I didn't have a car. And so, like, buying records was a big deal. You'd be like, okay, I have enough money, I can buy a record. And so you'd go into the city, you'd go into the record store, and you'd be like, what am I going to get? I don't, so I bought some weird shit. Like, the first record I ever bought was Leonard Skinner's Street Survivors. The cover, I don't know if you remember it, but it was, the original one was all the dudes like standing there with flames coming around them, which was they ended up, getting rid of that cover because of the plane crash and stuff. But that, and then in a band called Firefall, which was, they had and I still remember the album name was Luna Moon, and it was just like this weird proggy soft jazz, and I have no idea why I bought that except for the cover, and that was it. It's like you go and you go, oh my god, this looks cool, and so you buy it, and that was the channels of music that were available to me.
Yeah, it's funny because talking about covers, so many of those covers, from those time periods are just seared into my brain. They're like so iconic as a part of, it was like a complete artwork. It's not just the music, but, the whole cover art of it, what sometimes was on the liner notes inside, which was really cool. But, and it's interesting that you would say that a lot of it came from your parents, because I tend to find, especially in all the people that I've talked to on this podcast, it's like usually the people that have really good taste in music, their parents had really good taste in music too, which was so helpful. And they came from a house that really loved music.
Yeah, that was definitely the case for me. Like, my stepdad was a musician and storyteller. My mother had been a folk musician her whole life at that point. And my dad was a musician, though he wasn't really around. So all our friends were musicians, and I started playing music at a young age. So folk music became a really big part of my life very early on. And not only did we have, all the classic rock stuff, but we also had a lot of folkways recordings. We had a lot of, so we had like this Appalachian stuff that had been recorded.
And did you do it as a family?
Yeah, we did. There was like a square dance band, and we also, I remember my first guitar lessons were paid for by going and playing old time music at Ben and Jerry's original ice cream shop in Burlington, which at the time was one ice cream shop. If I recall correctly, I think it was in an old gas station that had been converted into their creamery, and they were there. It was at that time, it was Ben and Jerry's was an ice cream shop in Burlington, Vermont. That was it. They sold crepes as well. You could get crepes. And so we'd go in and play music and get dinner and put a hat on the ground, and we get enough money to pay my guitar teacher, but whatever he was charging, it was like $15 or something. So yeah, we played music, and then all my family friends were all musicians as well. So I just grew up around that vibe.
Do you find that, it seems to be like a really stupid question to ask, but do you find when you're in the kitchen and stuff, do you play a lot of music, and do you think that
no
really
no actually my kitchens professionally, Sometimes when I'm at home, I'll turn some music on while I'm cooking by myself. But
Yeah.
if there's other people in the kitchen, music interferes with communication.
Yeah, I
So
just
when you
meant though
walk,
at
yeah,
home.
okay, yeah.
Not like at
But
a
for me,
professional.
when you're cooking,
Yeah.
I have like I probably cook professionally more than I've cooked at home. So that's my first thought is professional kitchen. So in the professional kitchen, we used to have music. The cooks could have music playing during prep as long as it wasn't too loud that they couldn't communicate. But as soon as
Yeah.
the dinner service started, music went off.
Yeah.
Um, and while I'm at home, I sometimes turn on the stereo, but often not. Uh, it's full confession is music isn't as big of a deal to me anymore as it was when I was younger.
Yeah.
My life has changed. I don't have as much time for it. I'm less curious about
Yeah.
new stuff. The time that I listen to music is when I'm in the car. I
Hmm.
listen to music a lot when I'm driving, and I listen to it when I'm on airplanes. Those are the
Which
two
are on a
places.
lot.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, I guess I asked that question because and I've talked to you about this. I'm horribly, Desmond will shake his head. I'm horribly impatient. And so cooking is, I mean, I don't know in the States how many times the fire department has come to my house and it's not even a joke. It's just like me cooking and it's because I've done something stupid, you know. But I found that lately I've been trying to cook more because I find it kind of cathartic. Um, and I'm trying to be more patient, but I've learned that putting jazz on, some Miles Davis or something, makes me more patient. Like I'll
Mm-hmm.
stay longer and I won't be more prone to go do something else. Like I'd love to cook better, but I don't know.
Well, it's not for some people, and
I
that's
like
fine.
yeah.
That's
But
totally
it's
fine.
fun. It's funny because like I wish I did have that palette because me and my son are always looking at those kinds of things and we love the artistry that goes into it as well. It's not just for us. Obviously, he has a palette as bad as mine, and we just like really bland stuff. But we really appreciate the artistry and we do try. Like we've discovered sesame seed oil, and that's like our big thing right now. But I mean, do you kind of view it also? I mean, it is called culinary arts, but do people kind of view it as, I don't know how that whole world is, but do people view it as art as well? Because to me, it seems like art
Some
as
people
well.
do. Some people do. Now,
And I'm not talking
I
about just like the carving and decorating. I'm just talking about putting that
yeah,
whole, curating that thing,
yeah.
that dish.
So, I mean, some people do. I don't. I think there's certain aspects to culinary trades and cooking that can be artistic, but I think that primarily it's in a professional way, it's a trade. You're a
Yeah.
tradesperson. You're a craftsperson. It's more of a craft than an art to me because basically, unless you're some kind of wild genius and you're concocting new flavors somehow, which very, 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 very few people have done to any great effect, you're just learning how to, you can learn how to be a cook. There's a lot of people I know who are very, very good cooks who are not, don't have a naturally good palate, who are just very, very good at being organized and following directions and understanding the science of what's going on. So you can I can take a decent line cook who has a shitty palate and get them making a sum tam that tastes like it was made by, somebody sitting by the roadside in Thailand. And the way that you do that is that you train them about the ingredients that go into it, and you teach them technique, and you teach them consistency, and you teach them how to look out for visual cues, for aroma, for even the sound that's being made. And these are the things that a craftsperson does. You build something, right? Same thing with being a bartender. You build something, you know. It looks like art because the people who are very, very good at it can do it very, very quickly and very, very naturally because they've been doing it for a very long time. And you can tell the difference between somebody who's very, very good at their trade and somebody who's not so good at their trade. The person who's not so good at their trade probably has a lot of fancy tools, but they don't have any flow. And if you watch somebody, it's the same thing. It's like a musician, right?
Yeah.
You can give a great guitar player any piece of shit guitar and it will sound like them. But what you'll find is somebody who's, a workman-like to like relatively untalented guitar player, they will try to find gear that makes them sound good.
Yeah.
I mean, you give Jeff Beck a $50 guitar and he's going to sound like Jeff Beck. And if you give somebody who's a shit guitar player a $50 guitar, and then give them a $5,000 guitar, they'll sound marginally better on the $5,000 guitar because it's in tune. But that's it, So being a cook also is repetition. It's muscle memory. It's storing knowledge about things, like being a carpenter or being a bricklayer or being a tiler. You have this set of skills that you develop. You understand the material that you're working with. And at some point, if you become good enough, and I'm not good enough, you can become an artist. You can become somebody who goes beyond the materials and beyond the muscle memory and beyond the knowledge and starts making something that's original and new. And those people are very few.
Yeah.
There's very few people like that.
Yeah. And I find it a lot of times too, maybe it's just particularly here, and I don't know what it's like in a lot of other places because I'm not a foodie. I don't go to fancy places. It's a psychological thing. It's my weird stuff. But we don't watch reality shows. We don't watch any kind of, but we do watch cooking shows.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, the reason is like we do find it like really, really fascinating how it all goes. But we are kind of curious is how it's portrayed, and it's very popular. It's on so many different things. All these cooking shows, they portray these kitchens as very cutthroat, full of egos, very mean-spirited. Is that how they are?
So what you're watching is a TV show.
Right?
TV shows are trade on, especially modern TV shows, especially competition shows, trade on that kind of vibe. They want conflict because without conflict, it's not compelling to most viewers. So look, when I was growing up, I came up in the 80s. The late 70s, the 80s, and the early 90s was the time frame when things were a lot more brutal in the kitchen, and it's kind of like the same timeline as Anthony Bourdain wrote Kitchen Confidential. So if you read Kitchen Confidential, if you haven't, you should. It's an accurate portrayal of a particular time in the restaurant world. Not every kitchen is like that. Not every kitchen was like that, but there was a certain amount of that kind of thing going on. But I can tell you that's certainly not the case anymore because you just can't do that. Like that's the kind of shit that gets you in the court. Like you just can't do it.
But I also sit there and I wonder, like, for somebody that might want that's a young person that's interested in cooking and stuff, are these types of things where you see like all this kind of negativity in the kitchen? It's dramatic. It makes good watching, but maybe somebody goes, "That's not me. I don't want to do that because."
Well, this is the problem because unfortunately that's not true. Unfortunately, kids look at this and go, "I want to be that guy." And it's been really difficult for the food industry because there's these unrealistic expectations about what it's going to be like based on watching these food shows. Yeah. And, the best kitchens are places where you go and there's respect for the product. There's encouragement to do well. There's rewards for good performance. And, there's coaching when things don't go well. Here's a question. Do you know anything about Gordon Ramsay ever being sued in court for harassment or?
No, I don't like.
Yeah, me either. That's because whatever you see on him doing on TV, he does not do in his restaurants because he would have had his pants sued off a zillion times. You can't do that. It's not okay. So even, and that's been true for a long time. It's not, you can't harass people in the workplace.
Yeah.
And the kind of stuff that he does on TV is a persona that he's put together for TV. Is he an intense dude? Yeah, absolutely. I know people who work for him. He's an intense guy. He came up in a time, he worked for Marco Pierre White, and that guy was definitely a monster in the kitchen. But that was an era, it was like, the 80s and early 90s, where that kind of behavior was par for the course. And there were a lot of hungry people who wanted to be part of that, who wanted to be in it, not because of that, but because there was this real kind of like desire to become a good chef or a great chef. And, here's one thing that hasn't changed about all that, which is that there is no way to go and become a truly good chef without actually going and working. That's it. You can't watch a YouTube TV. You can watch a YouTube video about how to make camu or something like that, like or chicharron, and you can go and recreate that, and you can plate it up prettily and take a picture and put it on social media. It doesn't make you a chef, right? It's not this, unfortunately, and that's what a lot of young cooks coming up look at stuff on TV, go, and they look it up on YouTube, and they find that there's instruction video for them to make beef intestines puff up like this, and they practice it and they do it, and they're like, I'm a chef. And it's just, that's not it. Like being a chef can be monotonous and repetitive, and working on the hotline is fun. It can really be a rush. Making something delicious is very, very satisfying, but it's hard work.
My dad went to a lot of different culinary schools because when I was a kid, he was on military bases and he had all the clubs. So he would go to these like culinary schools to see how it was, so he could kind of say this is what he wanted from the chefs at his different places. I was really fortunate growing up. A lot of people say, your mom's Thai. I don't eat Thai food. And so growing up, all my friends are like, are you crazy? Your mom's Thai. You don't eat Thai food? I'm like, no, I don't eat Thai food. I'm like, my dad did all the cooking. And he was, Polish American. So it was a lot of meat and potatoes, but there was some techniques. He taught me how to make a roux. That's one of the most helpful things. One of the only things I could do, but I can make cream of chicken soup from scratch. And I'm so proud of myself. That's my big thing, my bacon soup.
Going back to when you were talking about technique and you can train chefs and they can practice. How do you create a menu? How do you put a menu together? How do you create a new dish?
Basically, for me, creativity is having a set of knowledge and being able to access all these things, to think of new ways of combining things that you know about. Again, it's very rare for somebody to just kind of like boom out of their forehead to create something completely new and different. Now, that seems to be something that happens in the music world a lot. Though there are songwriters who are very workmanlike, right? Who just work. But I was in Portland, for a long time, and I was friends with like lots of people there, a lot of musicians. I was in the bands, and I knew Elliott Smith, and I knew the guy who recorded him, Larry Crane, who's Jackpot Studios. He's still recording in Portland. He's a brilliant guy. And Larry told me one time, he's like, listen, I was like, what's it like recording with Elliott? And he said, look, he comes in. When we recorded the second record, basically, or second or third record, I can't remember. He said he would show up and he'd sit down at the piano and he'd play something, and then he'd sit down at the drums and he'd play something, then he'd play the bass, then he'd play the guitar, and then he'd add a couple more things, and then he'd do the vocals at the very end. And Larry's just listening to this because he's building it basically from like a very basic rhythm place and building it slowly in the studio. But he was very methodical. He'd stand up from the drums and he'd go to, I can't remember, it might have been the drums first, and then he'd stand up then he'd go to the piano, and then he'd go to the guitar, and he'd go to the bass, then he'd go to the guitar. And Larry said, look, Elliott would just come into the studio. There'd be nothing written down. He'd just show up with this thing in his head, and he would just do it. And Elliott was one of those artists who would wake up in the morning with a song just like here, and he had to do it. He had to play it. because if you didn't play it, like something bad would happen, right? And so to me, that's an artist. I think that chefs are a little more workman like that. Like I've woken up in the morning with an idea for a dish, but it's based on something that's happened before. It's usually a variation of something, right? It's a variation or a combination of a couple of things. You kind of go, oh yeah, just gonna do that, and it'll come out good, right? And so the creative process is often just thinking about accessing your knowledge and kind of going, well, what can I do? And for me, for the most part, for most of my career, there's been very little in the way of during the times when I owned restaurants, there was very little in the way of me kind of going, wow, here's something completely new, because that wasn't what I was doing. I was trying to recreate something that existed already. But there's some notable exceptions. There were like the Pok Pok Affogato, right? When I worked at a spot called Zeffiro in Portland, we had the gelato affogato, which is gelato drowned in espresso, right? It's a classic Italian thing. And when I was opening the first Pok Pok, I was like, how, as least I people don't necessarily eat dessert, unquote, the way that we do in the West. It's kongwan, it's sweet things, and you have it in the morning, or you can have it in the afternoon, you can have it after dinner. It doesn't really matter. It's a sweet thing. So trying to come up with a menu that made sense to Americans, where you got to have some desserts, right? Dessert. I was like, what can I do that is going to be more desserty than like deep fried bananas, or like very, very complicated Kham Thai, which is I love and I like to make, but it doesn't make sense from a restaurant standpoint. It's too unfamiliar to most people in the West, and you make it, you eat it, that's it. I was like, what can I do? And I remembered, I accessed my memory. I'm like, okay, well, I used to work at Zeffiro, and one of my favorite things there was an affogato. But I also, in Southeast Asia, have eaten my breakfast often while I was backpacking was at a market where I would have coffee with sweetened condensed milk out of a sock, or in Vietnam where it's, dripped both with sweetened condensed milk. And you often eat it with patanko, right? Or
That's what I asked for this morning.
right? Yeah, coffee with patanko. And I was like, well, and I had an aha moment where I went, okay, patanko, I can just make those because it's like a donut, right? It's an unsweetened donut, more or less. They're delicious, but for the affogato, all I have to do is make sweetened condensed milk ice cream and pour Vietnamese coffee on top of it and serve it with patanko, and I've got an original sounding dessert that is in fact based on two of my experiences in my past life that I just stuck together. And that was on the menu for 15 years, and it was our best selling dessert. And it was, making sweet condensed milk ice cream was easy. I was just like, how can I make this? And it turns out that the easiest way to make it was just to combine sweet condensed milk with heavy cream and spin it in an ice cream maker. And that's all you have to do. So it suited me great because I needed something that wasn't too complicated, because I couldn't have a pastry chef. I had to do something that was easy. So, the creative process there, I've just told you the creative process, but there was also, at the end of it, the result was that I had a menu item that I knew people would understand because they understood affogatos. And I had something I knew was going to be relatively easy to execute, that could be very, very consistent, and that it fit in with the vibe of what I was doing at the restaurant. So that's it. That's the creative process.
Yeah, because I think that, like somtam, all that kind of stuff is for a Thai person comfort food. Patanko is a comfort food. That's why I asked this morning, could I have some shalon and some patanko? That's what I wanted to have. And some khanom krok. There's a lady that does khanom krok here. And those are that's my kind of comfort breakfast. Like, yeah, sometimes I like an American breakfast, bacon and eggs and hash browns. But a lot of times it's that I wake up in the morning and I go outside and I let the cats out, and I can smell, because I live across the street from the Dalpoon market, which is a huge market, and I could smell everything, and I'm like, yeah, I gotta have some of that.
Yeah.
So, back to you, Desmond. I'm sorry.
And when you introduce these new menu items and you get feedback from the customers, and it's positive feedback, how does that make you feel?
when I was younger and I worked as a sous chef or chef wherever I was working, it fed my ego for sure. Because I was a bit more wild in my creativity when I was younger, and I was always trying new shit. And when people dug it, of course, it feels like a pat on the back. But later on, when I opened Pok Pok, what I realized I was going to have to do is put aside my ego for the most part, because what I was trying to do was recreate this food from a different place that didn't need any improvement. And all I had to do was, not fuck it up and do my best to make it as good as the people who taught me how to make it, and I owned a restaurant, and I didn't have investors. I didn't have partners. I was, I was in the shits every day for many years in a row, and I didn't have time to go, hey, that was awesome, because I was so like worried about, is the dishwasher going to break again today? Is there going to be enough money in the bank account to pay for the vegetables? Is the payroll going to be done on time? And how do I hold on to employees, and how do I do this? How do I do that? It's just solving problems all day long, every day. So if I made something like the affogato that worked, that people ordered, I was like, good, I don't have to fucking worry about this anymore. I've got something that people order, and I've solved a problem. I've got a dessert menu. People seem to like it. That means they're going to order it. This is good for me. That was my thought process. I'm a Capricorn, by the way. I don't know if that makes sense.
Do you think that sometimes that takes away from the love of cooking, all the
100%.
part of it?
100%. And ultimately what it did was that the business became so much more important than anything else that it was what finally got me to stop doing it.
And it's funny, and I asked you that because I've heard lately from a lot of different people who kind of felt that they loved what they were doing, whatever it was, whether it be in education or something, but then they found that all the other stuff kind of took away from that original love, and so they had to get away from it.
Right. So here's the thing. The kind of restaurant that I opened was like a very personal, very specific kind of thing. And it was a dream, right? This is why a lot of people open restaurants. It's because they have a dream. And in their mind, the dream is, I'm going to make this wonderful food and feed people, and people are going to have a great time. That's this much of the pie. Okay. When you're running a restaurant or any business, the creative fun part is this much. This much is the actual business part. And if you ignore this part completely disappears, because you can't sustain it with this alone. You have to, it's going to sound like a business seminar, but really it's true. If you do not give the percentage of energy that's required to maintain the 90% of the business that is the business, and you give all your energy to the 10%, which is the fun creative part, you're not going to have that fun creative part for very long. You have to give your energy to that other stuff. So what often happens is people become disillusioned because they're like, all I want to do is cook barbecue, but I'm dealing with two cooks who have decided not to come to work today, and one of the smokers has a crack in it, and the supplier didn't bring my brisket, and the truck's broken, and I owe taxes, and payroll's coming due, and that shit never ends. It never ends. There is no solution to that part. There's no solution. There's only grind at it constantly, right? You can solve the problem of a menu. Like, what am I going to do for a menu? And you can make a menu, and a menu can become something and you have to change it every now and then, but it can be a finished product. Like and you can make a plate of food, and it can be a finished product, and it's amazing. This is one of the amazing things about working in a restaurant or owning a restaurant, is that you see cases of food come in the door in the morning, and plates of food go out to the tables by the end of the night. You even see the garbage go out with the leftovers from all that stuff, and you get to clean the toilet from people taking a crap after eating it. It's like you get to see the entire process from start to finish. And that's incredibly rewarding. But what you never see a finish to is this other crap. there's always going to be another payroll. There's always, so you have to, if you're going to do this kind of thing, going into it, it pays to really understand that that's going to be your primary job as an owner, is to make sure that this little piece is protected because you're taking care of all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And when this thing becomes zero and all you're doing is dealing with the business, that's when people start going, why am I doing this? It doesn't make any sense, especially if you're not making any money.
I think that's good. I mean, it is like a masterclass in business, but I think that that's actually really important for people to think about or hear about, because, I mean, for example, my son listens to the podcast, and a lot of his little friends do, because I used to teach them, so they all do, but they're starting to talk about like what they want to do and things like that. And that is, you know, a lot of people think that this generation is kind of like a lost generation, that they're all, but his generation, thankfully, are not like, when I ask them, what do you want to do? Thankfully, not one has said, I want to be an influencer.
These kids are like, is this Gen Alpha? Is that what they're calling it?
I think now they're Gen Z. He's Gen
No,
Z.
Gen Z are like late teens, early 20s. I think they've given a name to the youngest people that are coming along now.
Yeah.
I have to look it up now because it's like, I think it's like Gen Alpha or something like that.
Really? I mean,
yeah.
I'm very hopeful of this generation more than some of the ones I've seen. They're much more chill, which is kind of nice. Like, they seem to have a sense of humor, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's lovely. But they're more thoughtful. I mean, I think that for a long time, people lost humor, and I like humor, and like animals and that kind of stuff. That's one of the reasons I like you. You're a cat dad. And I always trust cat dads, dog dads. It's just animal people. I just trust animal people.
Why is that?
I'm probably like a quasi misanthropist. Like I fear people. Like, I'm horrendously shy. I don't like to go out because I don't like to leave the house because I generally am very shy of people. People just, I feel awkward. I feel like I can't relate.
I think animals tend to be good judges of character as well.
That's true.
No, they don't listen to what people say. They just sense the energies. They know. They seem to inherently know if somebody's a good person.
When my animals don't like somebody, I pay attention. Then that somebody's not really coming over anymore.
I don't want to make this political, but over the last few years, have you seen any difference on a daily basis? Because we see all this stuff on the news about, people's opinions and what everybody thinks of everyone else. But in restaurants, has the number of people going into a restaurant and eating, has that been affected at all?
By the political divide?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Like, in America, the political divide is also a geographical divide. So in all the markets that I've lived in, Portland, LA, New York, where I've owned and operated restaurants and spent the last 30 years of my life, no. I mean, I think that we live in, the United States is a very, very divided nation, and it's geographical as well as ideological as well as political. So, there's people who love to go to Chick-fil-A, for instance, and I won't go to Chick-fil-A, but not because they're, the people who run it are like these political weirdos to me, but because I think the food's disgusting. Look, yeah, of course, there's been, certain cases where people have like boycotted food brands or restaurants based on their owners' political beliefs. But to be honest with you, I don't think that it has really deeply affected. There's many, many other things that affected, restaurant attendance much more deeply than political divide.
I have a question. You're probably friends with him too, Andrew Clark.
I've met Andrew a couple times, yeah.
So I saw one time that he's got, this side business, but they do kind of curate these like really cool curated different types of tours around here. But one of the things that I saw was that he had like this curated tour where people can go to like eat. And I was like, wow, that's a thing. And so I was going to ask you, because that sounds actually like a really cool thing. Like instead of going sightseeing and stuff, that people go to places and they meet up with somebody that takes them like on a tour of food. Is that a thing?
Well, I hope so. It's how I make my living these days. I well, quite literally, no, I mean quite literally, that is how I make my living. I do personal food tours here in Chiang Mai. People come to me through my website. They come to me via two pretty bespoke travel companies send me
Yeah, yeah.
clients. And then I also work for a company called Roads and Kingdoms, which was Anthony Bourdain joint with a couple of guys named Nathan and Matt. And we do that on a global way, where we kind of take people around and show them certain parts of the world through the lens of mostly through food and drink. And it's based on basically how Tony used to travel.
Yeah.
Now, we do, those trips are more intense. They're like the trips that I do, are up in Chiang Mai are day long or half day long things that are pretty deep. But we do that. And we also do, Roads and Kingdoms does a Northern Thailand trip and we do a Southern Thailand trip. But it's a week long and it's super in depth. And it does focus on food. And it's one of the fastest growing segments of the travel industry at the moment. Like every major travel group has a culinary option. Smiling Albino, that there's an interesting guy you can talk to if you know Dan Fraser, really interesting guy. Has a company called Smiling Albino. It's a very bespoke travel company. Just like bog standard travel companies do food tours. So there's a lot of interest in it.
That's where I saw it. Maybe it wasn't Andrew
Yeah,
Clark. Maybe it was on Smiling Albino. Because
could be. I don't know.
on Twitter. Yeah, I think that maybe
Yeah,
it was on that.
but it's very
To
much a thing.
me,
Yeah,
that to me makes so much sense because, like, I mean, if people go someplace, like, I just, took my mom to Ayutthaya just to get her out, but we saw a lot of different tourists there and a lot of people bike riding and stuff. And I thought, okay, that's one way to experience culture or something. But I think that food, I mean, even despite my weird food issues, like I think that there's like such a pure way for people to express like this is where we're from, this is how we are. My mom's from Ringshon, she's from Chonburi, so um she's always telling me, oh, this is from Chonburi, this nobody makes it like this and you have to go here. And
of
when I
course.
take her back, we've got to go like find some lady on some tiny little alley and she's got like a little window and she's like, no, but this is the best of this here. She's like, you can't get anything like this here. And it's like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Well, I mean, Thai people, I mean, that's one of the main impetuses for traveling is to eat. I like Chinese people too. I just like it's a huge deal. So I think, for many cultures, that is one of the main reasons to travel is to eat. And for Westerners, because we've been so sort of sheltered for so long, uh, and been kind of averse to anything weird, it's a very exciting thing. It's not as sort of like routine. Like, of course, you're Thai. It's like we're going to a Ayutthaya, we're going to go eat boat noodles, and we're going to the shore, we're going to Cham, and we're going to have hoi tot and deep fried crab, and that's just what we're going to do. There's no question. Like, why are you going? Like, well, we're going to eat seafood. Why would you go? It. Whereas for us, it's like, well, we're going to go to the beach, and the first thought in our head isn't like, what are we doing at the beach? Oh, we're going to go lay in the sun and we're going to go swimming in the waves and, we're going to have some drinks. And Thai people, it's like, we're going to be having, deep fried fish cakes and we're going to be having grilled squid. We're going to be drinking, and it's like, that's why they're
Yeah.
there. That's one of the main reasons why I fell in love with Thailand is because when you mentioned the word foodie, and I don't identify as foodie, but like, everybody in Thailand's a foodie.
Yeah.
Everybody. Like
Yeah.
you talk to a kid, maybe not so much these days, but in the old days, you could ask a kid walking down the street, "Hey, where's the best noodle restaurant around here?" He'd be like, "Just right there." What kind of noodles do you want to have? And that place right there is the best. And so everybody has this sort of like conscious. I sit in restaurants in Thailand, and I listen to what people are talking about while they're eating lunch. And they're talking about other lunches that they've had, what they had for breakfast, and what they're going to have for dinner. That's what they're talking about.
It's funny that you should say that, because I took my mom and my son out the other day, and my mom was complaining. She's like, about my son. She's like, all you're talking about is food, and he was telling me about a ramen place that he just discovered. And I'm so glad he's not like me. He tries a lot. He goes out
Hmm.
with his friends, and it's a cultural thing that even though, he's half Scottish and he's American, but he's the Thai part in him with food is like him and his friends are always going in groups of like 10,
Hmm.
11, and
Hmm.
their whole table is covered with food and they're all eating a little bit of everything. And I'm like, oh, that's really
That's
cool.
great.
He's
That's
not
really
gonna be
good.
like me. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
not.
fantastic. I mean, there are very few ways in which that are better than this in having a good time with a bunch of people. It's a great way to connect. You have a sub if the conversation gets weak, you've got a subject right in front of you. You can talk about that.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's ready-made good time.
I saw a meme yesterday or 2 days ago, and it said it was a clock, but every 2 hours it said it said something about Thailand, and every 2 hours it said time to eat, snack, dessert, time to eat, snack, and that's
Yeah,
pretty much how it is.
yeah, for
Um,
sure.
I don't want to keep you too long. Desmond, did you have any more questions?
I've got one more, which is very basic, and this is because of my lack of refinery when it comes to eating. As a chef,
Because you drink your food.
as a as thank you. As a chef, when you go out to a restaurant, do you find it possible to just sit and eat, or is your brain wired to always be critiquing?
The answer is that during the time. Of course, I can't give you a straight answer on this, so I'll give you anecdotal,
Yeah.
and then get back to the. When I was a musician, I was playing in bands and I was doing a lot of recording. I ended up stopping enjoying listening to records as much anymore because I started listening to the process. Started hearing the process. It's like, oh, they've panned right on the snare drum on that one, and the vocals are panned hard right, and the bass and everything is center and up, and then oops, there's somebody gaffed there. It's like, and then, or you like, this is just way too overproduced. Why did they put so many bleeps and blops in it? And you start listening to that and you stop hearing the song. You start hearing the process, and that can ruin it for you in a lot of ways. And being a restaurateur, being a chef is different than being a restaurateur. Being a restaurateur, you see everything from the chicken bone that's lying underneath the banquette to the burned out light bulb to the person in the corner who's trying to get the attention of the waiter, to a plate of food that just went by you that is not right, to somebody having, you see everything. When you go out to eat, if you're in that environment all the time and you're in another restaurant, it's the same environment, you see everything and you stop being able to enjoy the experience as much because you see everything, right? And so there was a period of time there where I was I didn't enjoy going out to eat as much anymore. Too often you'd walk into a place and you'd be just like, the music's too loud. I can't have a conversation. Uh, the soup was cold and the waiter didn't show up when I needed him. And you start thinking about this shit. Your head starts spinning. You're just like, and it's your friend's place, and you're stressed out because you're gonna have to, either not say anything to your friend. Like, if you're in a band and your friend sees you play and you didn't play that good that night, what do they say? They say, room sounded good tonight. They're not going to say, hey man, you guys killed it. Like the, scratch cat song was amazing. They're not going to say that to you. They're just going to say, oh wow, you guys sounded good tonight. And so you go through this whole thing where you're just like, I can't, you just say thank you. So we had a great time.
Yeah.
And that's it. So but the flip side of it is, if you walk into a place and it's truly great and it bowls you over and they get you to stop looking at that stuff and just focusing on the food and the atmosphere and the service, it's the feeling that you get is just enhanced because you know how hard it is for that to happen, right?
Yeah.
So when you're in a truly great place and you have all this knowledge and this awareness, the feeling that you get, I think, is better than the average person would have, right? It's like being a musician and just hearing somebody play a song in a way that just like, you're just, I don't know what's going on here, but this is unbelievable. And, not that lay people can't have that experience, but as a tradesperson or an artist or a thug, like when you get that kind of experience, it can be much heavier. Well, it's a lot easier for me now because now I don't own any restaurants and I don't ever want to own another restaurant in my life. So, that stuff's starting to fade and I don't think about it on a daily basis. So I'm much more easy to please these days. But having said that, we eat at home probably 28 days a month, dinner. I'd go out to eat dinner maybe, unless I'm working. If I'm working, it's every meal is out. But left to our own devices, I cook at home, cook very, very simple food, and go out to dinner very, very rarely. So when we do, it's a treat.
Yeah.
And I as a result, I'm not as adventurous as I used to be as far as places that I will go. I tend to choose places that I know are good, that I know I'm going to enjoy, until they're not. And unfortunately, that happens on a regular where you're in a place where you're just like, can't come here anymore. Food's hit the skids. It's happened to me twice in the last month. I was just like, oh, this place used to be great. And it might be great again if they get another cook.
I'm going to ask you some quick questions.
Sure.
Just kind of quick, rapid questions. When's the last time you picked up your guitar?
Yesterday.
And how often do you play?
These days, very infrequently. It's kind of like keep my calluses up, but I don't sit down and play for hours a day like I used to at all.
How many different bands can you remember being in?
I'd have to go through the mental checklist, but I'm guessing it's somewhere in the neighborhood of a dozen.
Was there one that you had a favorite band name?
Yeah.
Most people have a favorite band name.
Well, I don't know about favorite band name. There were like
incarnation of a band.
Well, my favorite band that I was in was a band called Vehicle. And it was this guy that I met through an ad in a record store. And he was this like genius guy who like made recordings in his basement or in the attic, wherever he was living. And he was just like this unbelievable. And we had a band for a few years, and it stopped when he decided that he didn't want to ever perform live again, much the way I never want to open a restaurant again, and he disappeared into the basement again. That was that. So yeah, Vehicle.
How old were you?
It would have been 1992 or 3 that I started with them, maybe 94. I can't remember exactly. I know it was maybe a little later, maybe 95. So I would have been 32.
Do you remember how old you were the first time you played like a live show?
Oh, yeah, I was like 14 or something.
Do you remember?
With my parents.
With your parents, yeah.
Yeah.
You alone? Or like with a band, like somebody apart from your family?
Yeah, I was at a talent show in my high school when I was like 18.
Do you know what song you did? Was it an original song, or did you?
No, we did an Allman Brothers tune. It wasn't Whipping Post.
Did you win?
I had no recollection of winning or losing, but it was like, to that point, it was like the highlight of my life.
Really?
Yeah.
That's really, really cool. Desmond, you're smiling over there. Did you have something?
No, I'm just enjoying the stories.
I think that it's interesting. A lot of people, just like you, like even me, it was one of the things, like I said, life kind of happened. And music used to be such a big part of my life when I was young. And then just life happened. I got married. I had a kid. I was doing different things. And like music kind of like fell out of just priorities. Like I just didn't have time to listen to music. I was doing all this other stuff. And then kind of like when COVID happened, and I was home all the time, which I was totally happy with, I started listening to music again and just like talking to people and a lot of these different conversations and hearing about it. But it's been cool because I've had feedback from other people saying, I've listened to this podcast and I forgot how much I loved music. And I'm like, oh, that's rad. Like if that's what somebody got out of it and they're going to go back and just listen to whatever kind of music, I'm like, that's really cool.
Yeah, I've never stopped loving music, and I still get a huge amount of enjoyment out of listening to stuff. But instead of like in the past, kind of like going out to see a bunch of live shows. There's not really much opportunity. You could, but it's not a vital scene going on here in Chiang Mai. And I don't like staying out super late and being around people smoking cigarettes. So I don't go up for live music much.
Yeah.
But there's like this back catalog of music that I listened to when I was younger. And what I enjoy now is going back and listening to stuff that I listened to years ago and just kind of going, like I'll go down a rabbit hole. Like I went down this Badfinger rabbit hole a while ago where I was just, holy shit. Like, because I hadn't listened to them much when I was younger. And then all of a sudden I started, and then I was just like, I went like all the way down the rabbit hole with Badfinger for like 2 years. They were on constant hard rotation, like one of the best bands ever. And I remember, there's certain things in modern life that trigger stuff. So like I was listening to NPR and they said, oh, it's the 45th anniversary of Diamond Dogs or whatever, it's like, and I was like, oh fuck, I have to go listen to Bowie. And so I like went down this rabbit hole listening to Bowie, his old records for like 2 years where I was just like heavy rotation and like, I can't get the song Queen Bitch out of my mind, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's funny when
know,
those old songs and then you hear them again because they're remastered or they re-release them and they're back into your life and sometimes I listen to stuff, I'm like, wow, that I hear so much more, or maybe I appreciate more, or I can pull out more than when I was young.
I'll go back and go, oh, I haven't listened to those guys for a while. And I go back and I'm like, what did I hear? What was it that I liked about these guys? Like, I just like, there's no substance here. I don't get it. But there's other things that like, I listened to a lot of Steve Malkmus and the Jigs. I wasn't a big Pavement fan. I liked them, but like Malkmus after Pavement, like that dude, they should put a statue of him outside of wherever he's from, Stockton or something like that in California. The dude is a genius. Like he's like a Frank Zappa level talent. He's unbelievably original and talented and amazing. And I just like his songs are in my brain just going, I can't get it out. So, and then, things will happen like Martin Phillips from the Chills just died. And, I lived in New Zealand at the height of the Flying Nun era. And I saw a bunch of those bands, including the Chills, in their full glory. Like Love My Leather Jacket. It was a huge hit in New Zealand when I was there. And I would go see them in a pub, pretty big pub, but it'd be a pub. And all the other bands that were in that scene, Straight Jacket Fits, Abel Tasman's, The Clean, all, Verlaine's, all that kind of stuff. And then I'm like, oh yeah, shit, I haven't listened to those guys forever. So, I'm going back and digging up my old Chills records. I mean, digging up an old record now means going to Apple Tunes and seeing if they've got it.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
When you listen to those old records, how do you feel? Do you feel, because sometimes when I'm listening to, like I stopped listening to the Smiths. Like when I was young, I listened to the Smiths, right?
Yeah.
I stopped listening to the Smiths. And the reason I stopped, and I told Desmond this, I said, I stopped listening to the Smiths because I was with so many people that hated the Smiths that I could not put it on because they're like, don't put on the Smiths. Like, I don't want to hear the Smiths. I don't want to hear Morrissey. So it was just like over time, like I didn't play it around people. And then it just kind of fell off the playlist. And then I started listening to it again and feeling that kind of, it was such a good feeling of the same way that I felt when I was those ages, like 14 and 15. I kind of felt that again. And it was really just that memory of, wow, this is what, what this person is singing about, these lyrics. Is this what the world is like? Because they were like poets to me at that age. When I was 14, 15, I'm reading all these lyrics and I lived a very sheltered life because I had a Thai mom. So, and she was very, very strict. So these people were telling me what the world was like. And so there was kind of just this sense of excitement. So going back and listening to that now, it's interesting to me that I can feel that again. And that's kind of cool.
The music never kind of like transports me back to a certain age. Not really. I mean, it kind of like what it does for me is, I just get blown away by the songs, like how how amazing they are, and how, you know, one of the first live shows I ever saw was Bob Marley and the Wailers, and I was 16. Seeing that live, like, blew my mind, like blew my tiny little mind completely. And I went through a period of time where all I listened to was reggae. Just everything was reggae. And, when I was a teen, late teen. And I recently went back and listened to some of the Bob Marley stuff. And the thing is that if you leave shit alone for long enough, things pop up that weren't there the last time you were looking. Like, so there's a live record of Bob Marley and the Wailers, and I can't remember what the name of it is, but it was last time I was listening to Bob Marley and the Wailers, this record was not a record. It was a recording somewhere. Somebody had it,
Yeah.
and they released it. And it was the Wailers at the height of their powers, before they'd blown up globally, like really gotten big,
Yeah.
but were like at their absolute best. It was just Bob singing. There was no more Peter Tosh.
Yeah.
The musicianship was off the charts. The songs were insane. The energy level was incredible. And I just listen to that and I get this vicarious thrill just listening to it. And that's the kind of thing, like, I want to feel like like this something, like when I'm listening to Dead Moon or something like that, where they're just, just rocking on mono. I just like, I just want, ugh,
Yeah. It's interesting because it's not, I'm on two different podcasts of mine. People have talked about just Bob Marley and how, like, Rob Allen from Las Vegas, he said that was one of those albums when he was young that, like, he would listen to Bob Marley. And so, I mean, he'd probably be jealous to hear that you got to see Bob Marley live, but that's the thing, that it's like these musicians are like so incredible that it seemed to resonate with so many different people, no matter kind of like what avenue of music people liked. It was like good music is good music.
I really think that when you hear the truly great musicians playing truly great music, like Little Feat at the height of their powers, and you just listen to what's going on, there's just something else going on there. It's not, and this is where for me, the art comes in. There's something spiritual that happens. And to be honest with you, I don't really hear it in current music. I'm not feeling it. And if you look back on it, you're like, wait a minute, Lowell George was 24. He died when he was like 28, 29, maybe, something like that. That means that he had like this career. He had played with Frank Zappa and the Mothers, and he had played, with Captain Beefheart, and, he had written all these songs, and he'd destroyed his life and died of it. And that all happened in like 15 years, like 10, 12, 15 years, became one of the greatest slide players ever, one of the greatest like soul singers ever, and wrote these incredible songs that will live forever. And that all happened before the age of 30. What was in the water back then? All those guys, Neil Young, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
Yeah. I mean,
Deja Vu, they were all in their early 20s when they wrote that. Like, how does that happen? I just don't know.
It's something that I talked about because it is hard. It is hard having a teenager, and luckily he has really good taste in music. But sometimes, like, I'll sit in there and I'll ask him, like, what are people listening to, and I hear it, and it's like, oh, it's just
every generation says that about their kids,
right?
And but it's always true. It's like, how can you listen to this crap? You should listen to Perry Como. He's a true artist. And
they weren't wrong.
But I mean, you listen to television. You listen to Richard Hell and the Voidoids. You listen to Blondie. You listen to all that stuff, all that no wave shit coming out of New York. Yeah. There was something in the water there. You listen to the Flying Nun stuff from the early 80s. There was something in the water there. There's always like some kind of thing that creates this like vibe, and it nourishes talent. And there's a good reason why when these bands leave that thing, they might get bigger, but they don't get better often. So I'm just looking for where is that happening now? I'm sure there's plenty of people who go, well, you got to go listen to this and go listen to that. And I'm hopeful that it's happening somewhere, but I haven't heard it.
It's funny because it's something that I talked about with different friends because coming from San Diego, the San Diego music community and the San Diego music scene is a very, very tight-knit music scene, and we've talked about it, where everybody's like really, really supportive of each other. And it's kind of one of those places where somebody meets, it's like you play music, you want to jam, and people are like, yeah, and you just go jam with somebody that you don't meet. And hearing that it's not like that in a lot of other cities, and I found that kind of surprising, which makes me kind of appreciate the San Diego music scene more. But I think that when you have these kind of scenes where everybody's supporting each other, like, the Seattle scene, I think that a lot more succeed because everybody's kind of playing off each other, not competing against each other, but I think bringing out the best in one another.
Oh, they start competing with each other when the money shows up. I I was in Portland during the grunge explosion, and I can tell you, as soon as Nirvana got signed, there was a change in the water, man. People were just like, "Hey, you can actually make," and it was just, it changed overnight.
Yeah.
It became something else. And some people survived it, some people didn't, and some people excelled at it, and some people didn't, and it was what it was. But it's the same thing with the restaurant world. Portland developed this there's an analog here between the music and the restaurant world. There often is. There's often people who work in restaurants who play in bands. That was one of the few ways in the past that you could have a job that didn't, you don't have to have any special skill, that was, had flexible schedules. You could quit and it wouldn't ruin your life. So lots of musicians. But the restaurant world in Portland, there's a book or two written about it. And, Portland was this place where all the right things happened all at the right time. Everybody worked with everybody and for everybody. And, this thing bubbled up, and it just happens. And when you're in it, you don't go, oh, there's this thing that's happening. You're just in it. Right. And it's all forensic later on where you're like, oh, there's this thing. And that happened in the Portland scene. It was like this really, like, everybody was stoked and helping each other. But at some point, people get leveraged financially, and there's not enough cooks around, so you're always trying to get another cook. And Portland managed to maintain a pretty friendly sort of environment for everybody there. Like, I can't talk shit about that. Like, there have been a couple of notable times where things got weird, but and I won't name names, but it was it was an intense time. But it's not what it was when it was in the early 2000s. It just isn't, because now people have financial responsibilities. But then again, when somebody, I don't buy into that term of, oh, they sold out. It's like, well, they've been slaving away with nothing forever, and they have a chance to make some money and not suffer.
Yeah.
Of course they should. So, it's just the cycle of life. And
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because a lot of people have been talking about, like, a lot of these old bands coming out, and they call them, these bands are doing the greatest hits tours, and kind of almost like saying it in kind of a negative way. And I'm like, people are still liking their music. People are buying.
Well, it's been happening. That's been happening forever. Like, back in the 90s, when I was playing in bands, there was this really cool scene happening. Who came through? Some Brit punk pop bands came through with the old lineup, and everybody's like, why are these guys playing? They're just grabbing money. And it's like, well, this is what they know how to do. What do you expect them to do?
And it's not that much money. It's like, no matter what,
No.
at the end of the day, for musicians, it's never enough money. Like, it's such a sad thing.
If they can still stand and deliver, they should do it. Look at Mick Jagger. The guy's like 80 something years old, and they're still going.
Yeah.
It's weird, but it's cool.
I think it is cool. I think that it's cool that different generations, it's a beautiful thing for me to see when I see, like, a lot of crowds. Like, I was looking at some videos from some recent Smashing Pumpkins show, because they were playing over in Europe, and they were playing with Weezer, two of my favorite bands, and I wish I was there. But looking at the crowds, and I could see, like, there was all ages, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. That's, like, super cool.
Everything's available now, right? You can hear and see everything, and all you need is like, an introduction to it. Sometimes it's a movie, like that whole thing with Tracy Chapman suddenly being huge again.
Yeah.
That was fantastic, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
I'm so happy because I mean she should get
right.
whatever she can get from that. Same thing with Kate
Yeah.
Bush when that
Yeah. That thing. Yeah.
became popular again. I was like, good for her, you know.
Yeah. No, it's great. I
Um,
mean, music, that's the thing. Music lives forever. And if it's good quality, it has relevance forever. It does. And, this is the music. This is the other thing that I think is interesting about this concept, this like food as art and music as art. Music stands forever. Like they will be playing Bach symphonies 2,000 years from now, right? And potentially there'll be some dude sitting in a pub singing a Nirvana song, 100 years from now. But a restaurant that had a kind of a cool dish and had a big following, like there's hundreds of thousands of them that have gone that nobody remembers anything about at all because food is ephemeral. It's not art. It's nourishment, and the making of it is a craft, and it's something to be enjoyed. It's a liminal thing, right?
Yeah.
It's here today, it's gone tomorrow.